both of my finishing pig studies, we did compare our pelleted treatments to mash, just so that way we could get that baseline to see what the pellets were doing, and I guess compared to the conventional way of feeding pigs with that mash feed. And so I guess looking at it, the improvements that you're getting out of pellets, especially with high ingredient prices that we've seen here in the last, 3 or 4 years, where it's something that we haven't seen in a while, you're going to be getting those the performance enhancements, and you're going to be able to make that money back in return. And so getting the improved feed efficiency, and in one of my studies, we saw a slight improvement in average daily gain.
Hello, everyone. I am Wilmer Pacheco. I am your host today for this episode of the Feed Science Podcast Show. And I have the pleasure today to have Patrick Badger, who is a research scientist at Borregaard. Hello, Patrick. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Dr. Pacheco. How are you doing?
Doing good. Patrick, first, I would like to, thank you for joining us in this podcast. I know that we are going to learn a lot today. And, my first question is like, if you could just tell us a little bit more about your background experience.
Yep. So I'd be happy to. So I grew up in southern Indiana on a small family farm. Grew up showing pigs and cattle in 4-H, and that sparked my interest in mostly the meat animal industry, and that ended up taking me to Purdue University, where I ended up getting my bachelor's in animal sciences, and kind of along the way started learning about nutrition, and more specifically swine nutrition, and that led me to reaching out to K-State, and I had some interest in feed manufacturing, and they forwarded me to Dr. Polk there at K-State in the feed science department, and so that kind of spiraled, and here we are. So I went out to K-State and did my master's with Dr. Polk and his feed science team.
Eastman serves veterinarians and nutritionists in agrochemical and animal health industries by helping them select, evaluate, and implement innovative nutritional programs. Eastman works with your team to customize your gut health approach in feed and water. Eastman's approach addresses nutritional and bacterial challenges and finds new ingredient preservation and hygiene solutions. Explore ways to accelerate and innovate your programs. Contact the Animal Nutrition Team at eastman.com.
Excellent. And during your master program, maybe if you could share the type of research that you did, during those 2 years, I imagine, of your master program.
Mm-hmm. Be happy to. So I pretty much did a lot of pelleting research. So majority of it was looking at pellet quality, and more specifically pellet quality and the effects on grow-finished pigs' growth performance, and also looked into a little bit of diet formulation and its effects on the subsequent pelleting parameters and pellet mill efficiency and pellet quality due to that diet formulation.
Excellent. And when you were making those different diets, did you use any binders? Because now that you work with Borregaard, or you just produce diets, and then you grind some of those pellets to produce the different levels of fines in the finished feeds for your research.
Yes. So in my first grow finish pellet quality study, we included a Maribon 2X, which is a Borregaard product. And so we were pelleting those diets, but we weren't getting enough fines at the feeder that we knew we could really accomplish our treatment assignments. And so we collected all of our pellets, we screened them all, and then we took a predetermined amount of those pellets back, and we reground those through a single pair crumble roll twice, so that way we could achieve our pellet fines, or as close as what we could get to those pellet fines of what you would typically see coming off a pellet mill.
Oh, this is really good. And I mean, since you did that research, could you just tell us more or less how does the level of fines affect the performance of the pigs, and if it's like if the industry should be looking for an optimum level of whole pellets at the feeder level.
Yeah, so to start off, I mean, obviously, as your percent fines increase, your feed deficiency is going to decrease, and a lot of times that's attributed to feed wastage at the feeder. Pigs will go through and they start sorting out those fines. I've actually seen pigs throwing fines out of the feeder, trying to get down to those pellets. And I guess to answer your question on the optimal level, I mean, I would say the optimal level is you get 0 fines if that's possible, which we know it's not. But trying to minimize those as best you can would be the best strategy going forward.
Excellent. And you know, when I was in the Smithfield, I never worked with pigs, but I always listened to some of the friends who were working at the farms, and they always say, well, if the pellet quality is not good, it's really hard to manage the. It's basically the percentage of coverage of the feed in the feeders. Did you see some of those issues when you were doing the research?
Yes, and so we have a little bit different system there at K-State. We had the feed logic system, so we were able to actually assign what feed is coming out of what bin and how much is going into each individual feeder. So we were able to kind of, I guess, dial in the amount of fines we would have, and then from there you'd have to go through and tighten down feeders depending on what the treatment was, whether it was a low fines diet or a high fines diet, or you're feeding the mash. And so you had some variation in feeder pan coverage, and you could have anywhere from, I would estimate 50% feed pan coverage, and you might have in excess of it, just because of the way the pigs were feeding and how they were feeding at the feeder at that growth stage.
Okay, and as you just mentioned, a few minutes ago, you say like feed quality is very important, and what factors can like the industry consider to make sure that they are feeding high quality pellets to pigs?
So a lot of the factors that your nutritionists, your feed mill managers, your operators all think about is the amount of protein in the diet, and a big one's also the fat content. Whether you have any sort of byproducts in there, whether it be DDGs, typically you see a reduction in pellet quality due to the oil contents, or you have something that's along the lines of like a wheat midge that's bringing in some gluten that might be improving a little bit of pellet quality. But I guess another way, and I think I'd have to say it, is add in a binder in to try to improve that pellet quality, especially if it's one of those that's borderline, whether it be a high corn diet where you're not bringing in a whole lot of protein to help with that binding, whether it be a late finisher where you're starting to pull some of that DDGs out too, and you're getting into that high corn, low protein.
Yeah, and if let's say if a company decides to use some of the binders, do you know like if the companies are using the same level across all the diets, or they typically focus on specific diets?
A lot of places will either use it across the board or they'll have it for specific diets. And so, I mean, with the level of what you use is kind of dependent. We typically recommend up to about 1% to maybe 1.5% of the diet, depending on how much binding you need. But you also have to factor in what the return on the investment is of that, because you're going to be maxing out that binding capability at some extent to where you're not going to be getting any sort of benefits from over using it. So we try to say anywhere between up to that 1%, maybe 1.5%, depending on the diet type and what kind of mill specs you're looking at.
Yeah, and this is just like one of the questions that just came to my mind right now. When I was with the Smithfield, I remember that we were using the binder, particularly in the diets for piglets, just because those diets had more lactose and more sugar, and we had to pellet those diets at a lower conditioning temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And we were using in a dry form, but I know there are some binders that can come in a liquid forms. Do you know what will be the advantage or disadvantages of each one?
So for dry, you're going to be able to just hand add that in. Makes it a little bit, depending on the facility, it can be a little bit easier. You might be able to put that in like a micro system to have that meter in then. Or you can actually have somebody go and do it if you're not using it too often. You can just have that in your hand add room, and you can go in, weigh it up every, 6 or 7 batches or however often you use it. And of course, being a binder, it's sticky, so it will cling to things. But that's the benefit of our products, is that they're water soluble. So you might get it on your jeans or your shirt, but it'll wash right out that night whenever you take it home. But then when looking at a liquid binder, you have some of the advantages of, if you have the storage capacity and you have the tank space in your feed mill, you can then have it in, and then you can pump that straight in. You don't have to have somebody hand adding it to where you might get it, a little bit of spillage, or you might have a little bit of shrink if, somebody in the warehouse accidentally rips a bag and it falls down and you lose half of it on the floor, things like that. And I guess another benefit, depending on how you look at it, depending on the seasons, is whenever you use our liquid product, or a liquid product in general, you're going to be adding some moisture to that mash. And like I said, depending on where you're sitting at on your moisture contents, that might be advantageous to you, because you're going to be bringing in about 50% water with our product, or liquid product. So then you're going to be able to get that moisture on, and you're going to have a little bit higher inclusion level to get up to the amount you need for the dry product.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially like when you are working like with corn with a low moisture content, right? And you are not able to get like to the right level of moisture after the conditioner. Yeah, that makes sense. And since you got like these liquid binders, do you also have like the equipment to pump it and to apply it into the mixer, or in that case the companies have to have like the equipment to do it, or can you use another equipment already in place too?
So we've seen some people that you could repurpose a fat tank for it, and use that to meter it in. Now you're probably going to be at a little bit lower inclusion rate than what your fat pumps may be in spec for, but you could use something along that lines. But a lot of times if you can, we would recommend pumping it into the conditioner, because like we said, it is a binder, it is sticky, and it depends on the feed mill how often you're climbing into your mixer, and submitting work orders and things like that, to where you could put it in the conditioning chamber and pump it in. Then you have that mixing through from the conditioner picks as it goes along. That's typically what we recommend, and that's what I like to see. But going into the mixer, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as you can tell, I don't have like any experience with these liquid binders, but I have seen in some feed mills that they have those systems to apply it into the conditioner, and it probably helps to reduce the buildup in the mixer, depending on on the inclusion level.
Yep.
And just out of curiosity, when you apply it in liquid form, can you still get to the target conditioning temperatures?
Yes. Because liquid, you're going to be going in at a little bit higher inclusion rate, because like I said, you're going to be bringing in about a 50% moisture on that. And so you got to get up to the certain amount of dry solids of what you would need for the binder itself. And so you should still be able to get up to that, because you're not going to be pumping in that much extra moisture. That's, it might not be the same ambient temperature, but a lot of times you're going to have some heat trace lines through there, or if you're in a fat tank room, it's probably going to be a little bit warmer than ambient. So you shouldn't have any issues achieving your optimum conditioning temperature.
Okay. Just on another topic too, when you were doing the research at Kansas, did you also compare, like pellet versus mash? Because I know like there are still some feed mills that I have seen just once that I went to the Midwest that they still feed, mash diets. But if you go like to the southeastern part of the U.S., then we feed mainly pellets here. So I don't know, like if you could share your thoughts on, feed form and mash versus pellets.
Yep. So yeah, in both of my finishing pig studies, We did compare our pelleted treatments to mash, just so that way we could get that baseline to see what the pellets were doing, and I guess compared to the conventional way of feeding pigs with that mash feed. And so I guess looking at it, the improvements that you're getting out of pellets, especially with high ingredient prices that we've seen here in the last, 3 or 4 years, where it's something that we haven't seen in a while, you're going to be getting those the performance enhancements, and you're going to be able to make that money back in return. And so getting the improved feed efficiency, and in one of my studies, we saw a slight improvement in average daily gain, which can be very hit or miss in some pelleting trials. We aren't quite certain on what's causing that, but it can be hit or miss, and it can be due to different environmental conditions and pig genetic lines and things like that potentially. But having that improvement and having that ease of handling, especially going from the truck into the bin and then the bin into the feeder, as long as you're minimizing those fines, it makes managing those feeders much easier as well.
So you will expect probably like in future years more of the industry moving to pelleted diets.
I think so.
I imagine ingredients, they are not going to get cheaper. They are just going to get more expensive, right?
Yes. And especially, if depending on things that happen with it throughout the world, I mean, you might have different tariffs or anything like that to where it's going to be harder to get some of these byproducts. And we're also going to be maybe potentially exporting more, corn and soybean meal and DDGs to other countries, to where, you're going to have increased competition for some of these. So I'd expect that more people are going to be turning to pelleting. There's been a lot of, I guess, interest into continuing this research. And I mean, we all know that pelleting, it's all said that pelleting is an art form, but whenever you're doing it right, it works really, really well.
That's true. And what about liquid feeding? Do you know if any companies in the US are doing a liquid feeding for pigs? And what will be your thoughts on that? And because I have heard, I have never seen, but in Europe, I know some companies are feeding, liquid diets.
Mm-hmm. I personally don't have any experience in it. I've seen a couple articles just briefly that's brushed across my desk, but I haven't been able to find a whole lot going on in the U.S. on it.
Okay.
It's time for our famous 3. Evonik Animal Nutrition is committed to ensure food security and safety while reducing the ecological footprint of animal farming. Its products and services use evidence-based solutions that seek to promote animal welfare and reduce reliance on natural resources. All this is underpinned by long-standing industry partnerships and deep customer understanding. Evonik's focus on efficiency, sustainable, healthy nutrition, and collaborations with livestock farming partners creates value for customers and consumers.
Yeah, and just to finalize, I always I particularly like to get the advice of our guests to students, and you went to Purdue, then you went to Kansas, finished the master, and then now you're working with Borregaard. What will be your advice, for students right now beginning, their undergrads, or just beginning their master degrees, how they can use the tools that the university provide to be successful once that they leave the university?
I would say my advice would be get involved in whatever interest groups you can join or even think about joining, whether it's in your major within your undergrad, whether it's in your graduate student organizations. Get involved in something that interests you and something that can help you when times get tough, because we all know college, graduate school, there's going to be a time where it feels like it'll break you. It's one of those where it's a marathon, not a sprint for the most of us. So just find some of those outlets that you can seek and be able to take a step back and know that okay, one C on a paper, one C on a test isn't going to define who you are as a student and as a person. Just take that chance to then build yourself back up and know what you can do from there to improve yourself and improve what you can and improve what's going on around you. It's just kind of taking that and building different stepping stones as you go as a person.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think that's a really good advice for students. I know like several students listen to this podcast, and it's a good opportunity for them just to learn about the different areas of not only like feed science, but also there are other podcasts available for swine. I think cattle and poultry. Thank you very much for meeting with me, Patrick, and I wish you like happy holidays.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much.